أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ولله ملك السماوات والأرض والله على كل شيء قدير. إن في خلق السماوات والأرض واختلاف الليل والنهار لآيات لأولي الألباب. الذين يذكرون الله قياما وقعودا وعلى جنوبهم. الذين يذكرون الله قياما وقعودا وعلى جنوبهم ويتفكرون في خلق السماوات والأرض ويتفكرون في خلق السماوات والأرض ربنا ما خلقت هذا باطلا سبحانك ربنا ما خلقت هذا باطلا سبحانك فقنا عذاب النار. ربنا إنك من تدخل النار فقد أخزيته وما للظالمين من أنصار. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ولله ملك الأرض والله على كل شيء قدير. إن في خلق السماوات والأرض واختلاف الليل والنهار لآيات لأولي الألباب. الذين يذكرون الله الذين يذكرون الله الذين يذكرون الله قياما وقعودا وعلى جنوبهم. الذين يذكرون الله قياما وقعودا وعلى جنوبهم. الذين يذكرون الله قياما وقعودا وعلى جنوبهم ويتفكرون في خلق السماوات والأرض ويتفكرون في خلق السماوات والأرض ربنا ما خلقت هذا باطلا سبحانك ربنا ما خلقت هذا باطلا سبحانك فقنا عذاب النار. ربنا ما خلقت هذا باطلا سبحانك فقنا عذاب النار. ربنا إنك من تدخل النار فقد أخزيته وما للظالمين من أنصار. وما للظالمين من أنصار. ربنا إنك من تدخل النار فقد أخزيته وما للظالمين من أنصار. ربنا إننا سمعنا مناديا ينادي للإيمان أن آمنوا بربكم فآمنا. ربنا إننا سمعنا مناديا ينادي للإيمان. سمعنا مناديا ينادي للإيمان أن آمنوا بربكم فآمنا. ربنا فاغفر لنا ذنوبنا وكفر عنا سيئاتنا وتوفنا مع الأبرار. وتوفنا مع الأبرار. ربنا وآتنا ما وعدتنا على رسلك رسلك ولا تخزنا يوم القيامة ولا تخزنا يوم القيامة إنك لا تخلف الميعاد ولا تخزنا يوم القيامة إنك لا تخلف الميعاد ربنا إننا سمعنا مناديا ينادي للإيمان أن آمنوا بربكم فآمنا ربنا فاغفر لنا ذنوبنا وكفر عنا سيئاتنا وتوفنا مع الأبرار ربنا وآتنا ما وعدتنا على رسلك ولا تخزنا يوم القيامة ولا تخزنا يوم القيامة إنك لا تخلف الميعاد فاستجاب لهم ربهم أني لا أضيع عمل عامل فاستجاب لهم ربهم أني لا أضيع عمل عامل فاستجاب لهم ربهم أني لا أضيع عمل عامل بعضكم من بعض. فالذين هاجروا وأخرجوا من ديارهم وأوذوا في سبيلي وقاتلوا وقتلوا فالذين هاجروا في سبيلي وأخرجوا من ديارهم فالذين هاجروا وأخرجوا من ديارهم وأوذوا في سبيلي وقاتلوا وقتلوا لأكفرن عنهم سيئاتهم ولأدخلنهم جنات جنات تجري من تحتها الأنهار ثوابا من عند الله ثوابا من عند الله والله عنده حسن الثواب. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اقرأ باسم ربك الذي خلق خلق الإنسان من علق اقرأ وربك الأكرم الذي علم بالقلم الذي علم بالقلم علم الإنسان ما لم يعلم اقرأ باسم ربك الذي خلق خلق الإنسان من علق اقرأ وربك الأكرم الذي علم بالقلم علم الإنسان ما لم يعلم كلا إن الإنسان ليطغى أن رآه استغنى إن إلى ربك الرجعى كلا إن الإنسان ليطغى أن رآه استغنى إن إلى ربك الرجعى صدق الله العظيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين. الحمد لله الذي خلق السماوات والأرض وجعل الظلمات والنور. الحمد لله فاطر السماوات والأرض جاعل الملائكة رسلا أولي أجنحة مثنى وثلاث ورباع يزيد في الخلق ما يشاء إن الله على كل شيء قدير. سبحان من خلق العباد بقدرته، سبحان من حكم العباد بعدله، سبحان من فاضت علينا نعمته، سبحان من وجبت علينا طاعته، سبحان من هفت القلوب لرحمته، سبحان من خشعت القلوب لذكره، سبحان من بكت العيون لخشيته، سبحان من يعطي ولا يعطي سواه، سبحان من خضعت له كل الجباه. سبحانك يا مالك الملك والملكوت، سبحانك يا رب العزة والمجد والعلياء والكبرياء والجبروت. اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على عبدك ونبيك ورسولك محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه وأزواجه. اللهم أصلح فساد قلوبنا، وأصلح ذات بيننا، وأصلح ولاة أمورنا، وأصلح أحوالنا، وأصلح بالنا، وأصلح بلادنا، وأصلح أزواجنا، وأصلح ذرياتنا، وأصلحنا وأصلح بنا، واجعلنا مصلحين، واجعلنا مصلحين بمنك وجودك وكرمك يا أكرم الأكرمين. اللهم ارحم ضعفنا واجبر كسرنا وآمن روعنا وتول أمرنا، وارحم ذلاتنا، وارحم ذلاتنا، واغفر خطيئاتنا، وتقبل دعاءنا، وتقبل صيامنا، وتقبل ركوعنا، وتقبل سجودنا، واستجب بفضلك دعاءنا. اللهم اقبلنا، اللهم تقبلنا واقبلنا واجعلنا من المقبولين بمنك وجودك وكرمك يا أكرم الأكرمين. اللهم إنا ضعفاء فقونا، فقراء فأغننا، أذلاء فأعزنا، لا نملك إلا الدعاء يا مولانا فاستجب لنا. اللهم استجب لنا، اللهم استجب لنا. اللهم اجعلنا من جندك فإن جندك هم الغالبون، واجعلنا من حزبك فإن حزبك هم المفلحون، واجعلنا من أوليائك فلا خوف عليهم ولا هم يحزنون، واجعلنا من أوليائك فلا خوف عليهم ولا هم يحزنون. سبحان الله وبحمده عدد خلقه ورضا نفسه وزنة عرشه ومداد كلماته. سبحان الله وبحمده عدد خلقه ورضا نفسه وزنة عرشه ومداد كلماته. سبحان الله وبحمده عدد خلقه ورضا نفسه وزنة عرشه ومداد كلماته. بسم الله الذي لا يضر مع اسمه شيء في الأرض ولا في السماء وهو السميع العليم. بسم الله الذي لا يضر مع اسمه شيء في الأرض ولا في السماء وهو السميع العليم. بسم الله الذي لا يضر مع اسمه شيء في الأرض ولا في السماء وهو السميع العليم. اللهم إنا نعوذ بك من أن نشرك بك شيئا نعلمه ونستغفرك لما لا نعلم. اللهم إنا نعوذ بك من أن نشرك بك شيئا نعلمه ونستغفرك لما لا نعلم. اللهم إنا نعوذ بك من أن نشرك بك شيئا نعلمه ونستغفرك لما لا نعلم. أعوذ بكلمات الله التامات من شر ما خلق. أعوذ بكلمات الله التامات من شر ما خلق. أعوذ بكلمات الله التامات من شر ما خلق. اللهم إني أعوذ بك من الهم والحزن، وأعوذ بك من العجز والكسل، وأعوذ بك من الجبن والبخل، وأعوذ بك من غلبة الدين وقهر الرجال. اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على عبدك ونبيك ورسولك محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. الله أكبر، الله أكبر، الله أكبر، الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. حي على الصلاة. حي على الصلاة. حي على الفلاح. حي على الفلاح. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله. يعرف قلبي هذا جمال المصطفى أنوارنا حتما صلوا على خير الأنام المصطفى بديع التمام صلوا عليه وسلموا أشفع لنا يوم الزحام. أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان المصطفى بديع التمام صلوا عليه وسلموا أشفع لنا يوم الزحام. يا تصديق بالنظام يعرف قلبي هذا جمال المصطفى أنوارنا حتما صلوا على خير الأنام المصطفى بديع التمام صلوا عليه وسلموا أشفع لنا يوم الزحام. المصطفى صلوا عليه وسلموا أشفع لنا يوم الزحام. يا تصديق بالنظام يعرف قلبي هذا جمال المصطفى أنوارنا صلوا على خير الأنام المصطفى بديع التمام صلوا عليه وسلموا أشفع لنا يوم الزحام. المصطفى بديع التمام صلوا عليه وسلموا أشفع لنا يوم الزحام. يا تصديق بالنظام يعرف قلبي هذا جمال المصطفى أنوارنا حتما أشرع لنا يوم الزحام. المصطفى بدر التمام، صلوا عليه وسلموا، اشفع لنا يوم الزحام. يا تصديق باللقاء، يا علم قلبي يا هدى، هذا جمال المصطفى، أنوارنا حتما. صلوا على خير الأنام، المصطفى بدر التمام، صلوا عليه وسلموا، أشفع لنا يوم الزحام. المصطفى بدر التمام، صلوا عليه وسلموا، اشفع لنا يوم الزحام. يا تصديق باللقاء، يا علم قلبي يا هدى، هذا جمال المصطفى، أنوارنا حتما. صلوا على خير الأنام، المصطفى بدر التمام، صلوا عليه وسلموا، أشفع لنا يوم الزحام. المصطفى بدر التمام، صلوا عليه وسلموا، اشفع لنا يوم الزحام. يا تصديق باللقاء، يا علم قلبي يا هدى، هذا جمال المصطفى، أنوارنا حتما. صلوا على خير الأنام، المصطفى بدر التمام، صلوا عليه وسلموا، أشفع لنا يوم الزحام. المصطفى بدر التمام، صلوا عليه وسلموا، اشفع لنا يوم الزحام. يا تصديق باللقاء، يا علم قلبي يا هدى، هذا جمال المصطفى، أنوارنا حتما. على خير الأنام المصطفى بدر التمام صلوا عليه وسلموا أشفع لنا يوم الزحام المصطفى بدر التمام صلوا عليه وسلموا أشفع لنا يوم الزحام يا تصديق باللقاء يا عين قلبي يا عيونا هذا جمال المصطفى أنوارنا حتما صلوا على خير الأنام المصطفى بدر التمام صلوا عليه وسلموا أشفع لنا يوم الزحام المصطفى بدر التمام صلوا عليه وسلموا أشفع لنا يوم الزحام يا تصديق باللقاء يا عين قلبي يا عيونا هذا جمال المصطفى أنوارنا حتما صلوا على خير الأنام المصطفى بدر التمام صلوا عليه وسلموا أشفع لنا يوم الزحام المصطفى بدر التمام صلوا عليه وسلموا أشفع لنا يوم الزحام يا تصديق باللقاء يا عين قلبي يا عيونا هذا جمال المصطفى أنوارنا حتما صلوا عليه وسلموا أشفع لنا يوم الزحام يا تصديق باللقاء يا عين قلبي يا عيونا هذا جمال المصطفى أنوارنا حتما صلوا على خير الأنام المصطفى بدر التمام صلوا عليه وسلموا أشفع لنا يوم الزحام المصطفى بدر التمام صلوا عليه وسلموا أشفع لنا يوم الزحام يا تصديق باللقاء حتما صلوا على خير الأنام المصطفى بديع التمام صلوا عليه وسلموا أشفع لنا يوم الزحام المصطفى بديع التمام صلوا عليه وسلموا أشفع لنا يوم الزحام يا تصويب باللقاء يا عين قلبي يا هذا جمال المصطفى أنوارنا حتما صلوا على خير الأنام المصطفى بديع التمام صلوا عليه وسلموا أشفع لنا يوم الزحام المصطفى بديع التمام صلوا عليه وسلموا أشفع لنا يوم الزحام يا تصويب باللقاء يا عين قلبي يا هذا جمال المصطفى أنوارنا حتما صلوا على خير الأنام المصطفى بديع التمام صلوا عليه وسلموا أشفع لنا يوم الزحام المصطفى بديع التمام صلوا عليه وسلموا أشفع لنا يوم الزحام يا تصويب باللقاء يا عين قلبي يا هذا جمال المصطفى أنوارنا حتما صلوا على خير الأنام المصطفى بديع التمام صلوا عليه وسلموا أشفع لنا يوم الزحام المصطفى بديع التمام صلوا عليه وسلموا أشفع لنا يوم الزحام المصطفى أنوارنا حتما صلوا على خير الأنام المصطفى بديع التمام صلوا عليه وسلموا أشفع لنا يوم الزحام المصطفى بديع التمام صلوا عليه وسلموا أشفع لنا يوم الزحام يا تصويب باللقاء يا عين قلبي يا نور هذا جمال المصطفى أنوارنا حتما صلوا على خير الأنام المصطفى بديع التمام صلوا عليه وسلموا أشفع لنا يوم الزحام المصطفى بديع التمام صلوا عليه وسلموا أشفع لنا يوم الزحام يا تصويب باللقاء يا عين قلبي يا نور هذا جمال المصطفى أنوارنا حتما صلوا على خير الأنام المصطفى بديع التمام صلوا عليه وسلموا أشفع لنا يوم الزحام المصطفى بديع التمام صلوا عليه وسلموا أشفع لنا يوم الزحام يا تصويب باللقاء يا عين قلبي يا نور هذا جمال المصطفى أنوارنا حتما صلوا على خير الأنام المصطفى بديع التمام صلوا عليه وسلموا أشفع لنا يوم الزحام المصطفى بديع التمام صلوا عليه وسلموا أشفع لنا يعرفك عني أعلمنا هذا جمال المصطفى أنوارنا حتما صلوا على خير الأنام المصطفى بديع التمام صلوا عليه وسلموا أشرع لنا يوم الزحام. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله الذي خلق السماوات والأرض وجعل الظلمات والنور ثم الذين كفروا بربهم يعدلون هو الذي خلقكم من طين ثم قضى أجله وأجل مسمى عنده ثم أنتم تمتعون وهو الله في السماوات وفي الأرض يعلم سركم وجهركم ويعلم ما تكسبون وما تأتيهم من آية من آيات ربهم إلا كانوا عنها معرضين فقد كذبوا بالحق لما جاءهم فسوف يأتيهم أنباء ما كانوا به يستهزئون ألم يروا كم أهلكنا من قبلهم من قرن مكناهم في الأرض ما لم نمكن لكم وأرسلنا السماء عليهم مدرارا وجعلنا الأنهار تجري من تحتهم فأهلكناهم بذنوبهم وأنشأنا من بعدهم قرنا آخرين ولو نزلنا عليك كتابا في قرطاس فلمسوه بأيديهم لقال الذين كفروا إن هذا إلا سحر مبين وقالوا لولا أنزل عليه ملك ولو أنزلنا ملكا لقضي الأمر ثم لا ينظرون ولو جعلناه ملكا لجعلناه رجلا وللبسنا عليهم ما يلبسون ولقد استهزئ برسل من قبلك فحاق بالذين سخروا منهم ما كانوا به يستهزئون قل سيروا في الأرض ثم انظروا كيف كان عاقبة المكذبين قل لمن ما في السماوات والأرض قل لله كتب على نفسه الرحمة ليجمعنكم لا ريب فيه الذين خسروا أنفسهم فهم لا يؤمنون ولو ما سكن في الليل والنهار وهو السميع العليم قل أغير الله أتخذ وليا فاطر السماوات والأرض وهو يطعم ولا يطعم قل إني أمرت أن أكون أول من أسلم ولا تكونن من المشركين قل إني أخاف إن عصيت ربي عذاب يوم عظيم من يصرف عنه يومئذ فقد رحمه وذلك الفوز المبين وإن يمسسك الله بضر فلا كاشف له إلا هو وإن يمسسك بخير فهو على كل شيء قدير وهو القاهر فوق عباده وهو الحكيم الخبير قل أي شيء أكبر شهادة قل الله شهيد بيني وبينكم وأوحي إلي هذا القرآن لأنذركم به ومن بلغ أئنكم لتشهدون أن مع الله آلهة أخرى قل لا أشهد قل إنما هو إله واحد وإنني بريء مما تشركون الذين آتيناهم الكتاب يعرفونه كما يعرفون أبناءهم الذين خسروا أنفسهم فهم لا يؤمنون ومن أظلم ممن افترى على الله كذبا أو كذب بآياته إنه لا يفلح الظالمون ويوم نحشرهم جميعا ثم نقول للذين أشركوا أين شركاؤكم الذين كنتم تزعمون ثم لم تكن فتنتهم إلا أن قالوا والله ربنا ما كنا مشركين انظر كيف كذبوا على أنفسهم وضل عنهم ما كانوا يفترون ومنهم من يستمع إليك وجعلنا على قلوبهم أكنة أن يفقهوا وفي آذانهم وقرا وإن يروا كل آية لا يؤمنوا بها حتى إذا جاءوك يجادلونك يقول الذين كفروا إن هذا إلا أساطير الأولين وهم ينهون عنه وإن يهلكون إلا أنفسهم وما يشعرون. ولو ترى إذ وقفوا على النار فقالوا يا ليتنا نرد ولا نكذب بآيات ربنا فقالوا يا ليتنا نرد ولا نكذب بآيات ربنا ونكون من المؤمنين بل بدا لهم ما كانوا يخفون من قبل ولو ردوا لعادوا لما نهوا عنه إنهم لكاذبون. وقالوا إن هي إلا حياتنا الدنيا وما نحن بمبعوثين. ولو ترى إذ وقفوا قال أليس هذا بالحق قالوا بلى وربنا قال فذوقوا العذاب بما كنتم تكفرون. قد خسر الذين كذبوا بلقاء الله حتى إذا جاءتهم الساعة قالوا يا حسرتنا على ما فرطنا فيها وهم يحملون أوزارهم على ظهورهم ألا ساء ما يزرون. قد خسر الذين كذبوا بلقاء الله حتى إذا جاءتهم الساعة بغتة قالوا يا حسرتنا على ما فرطنا فيها وهم يحملون أوزارهم على ظهورهم ألا ساء ما يزرون. وما الحياة الدنيا إلا لعب وللدار الآخرة خير للذين يتقون أفلا تعقلون. قد نعلم إنه ليحزنك الذي يقولون فإنهم لا يكذبونك ولكن الظالمين بآيات الله يجحدون. ولقد كذبت رسل من قبلك فصبروا على ما كذبوا وأوذوا حتى أتاهم نصرنا ولا مبدل لكلمات الله ولقد جاءك من نبأ كان كبر عليك إعراضهم فإن استطعت أن تبتغي نفقا في الأرض أو سلما في السماء فتأتيهم بآية ولو شاء الله لجمعهم على الهدى فلا تكونن من الجاهلين. صدق الله العظيم. المصطفى بدر التمام، صلوا عليه وسلموا، اشفع لنا يوم الزحام. يا تصديق باللقاء، يا عين قلبي يا هذا جمال المصطفى، أنوارنا حتما. صلوا على خير الأنام، المصطفى بدر التمام، صلوا عليه وسلموا، أشفع لنا يوم الزحام. المصطفى بدر التمام، صلوا عليه وسلموا، اشفع لنا يوم الزحام. يا تصديق باللقاء، يا عين قلبي يا هذا جمال المصطفى، أنوارنا حتما. صلوا على خير الأنام، المصطفى بدر التمام، أشفع لنا يوم الزحام. المصطفى بدر التمام، صلوا عليه وسلموا، اشفع لنا يوم الزحام. يا تصديق باللقاء، يا عين قلبي يا هذا جمال المصطفى، أنوارنا حتما. صلوا على خير الأنام، المصطفى بدر التمام، صلوا عليه وسلموا، أشفع لنا يوم الزحام. المصطفى بدر التمام، صلوا عليه وسلموا أشفعنا يوم الزحام يا تصديق بالإنكار يا علم قلبي يا هدى هذا جمال المصطفى أنوارنا حتما صلوا على خير الأنام المصطفى بديع التمام صلوا عليه وسلموا أشفع لنا يوم الزحام المصطفى بديع التمام صلوا عليه وسلموا أشفع لنا يوم الزحام يا تصديق بالإنكار يا علم قلبي يا هدى هذا جمال المصطفى أنوارنا حتما صلوا على خير الأنام المصطفى بديع التمام صلوا عليه وسلموا أشفع لنا يوم الزحام المصطفى بديع التمام صلوا عليه وسلموا أشفع لنا يوم الزحام يا تصديق بالإنكار يا علم قلبي يا هدى هذا جمال المصطفى أنوارنا حتما صلوا على خير الأنام المصطفى بديع التمام صلوا عليه وسلموا أشفع لنا يوم الزحام المصطفى بديع التمام صلوا عليه وسلموا أشفع لنا يوم الزحام يا تصديق بالإنكار يا علم قلبي يا هدى هذا جمال المصطفى أنوارنا حتما صلوا على خير الأنام المصطفى بديع التمام صلوا عليه وسلموا أشرع لنا يوم الزحام المصطفى بدر التمام صلوا عليه وسلموا اشفع لنا يوم الزحام يا تصديق باللقاء يا علم قلبي يا هدى هذا جمال المصطفى أنوارنا حتما صلوا على خير الأنام المصطفى بدر التمام صلوا عليه وسلموا أشرع لنا يوم الزحام المصطفى بدر التمام صلوا عليه وسلموا اشفع لنا يوم الزحام يا تصديق باللقاء يا علم قلبي يا هدى هذا جمال المصطفى أنوارنا حتما صلوا على خير الأنام المصطفى بدر التمام صلوا عليه وسلموا أشفع لنا يوم الزحام المصطفى بدر التمام صلوا عليه وسلموا اشفع لنا يوم الزحام يا تصديق باللقاء يا علم قلبي يا هدى هذا جمال المصطفى أنوارنا حتما صلوا على خير الأنام المصطفى بدر التمام صلوا عليه وسلموا أشفع لنا يوم الزحام المصطفى بدر التمام صلوا عليه وسلموا اشفع لنا يوم الزحام يا تصديق باللقاء يا علم قلبي يا هدى هذا جمال المصطفى أنوارنا حتما خير الأنام المصطفى بديع التمام صلوا عليه وسلموا أشفع لنا يوم الزحام المصطفى بديع التمام صلوا عليه وسلموا أشفع لنا يوم الزحام يا تصويب بالرضا يا عين قلبي يا علا هذا جمال المصطفى أنوارنا حتما صلوا على خير الأنام المصطفى بديع التمام صلوا عليه وسلموا أشفع لنا يوم الزحام المصطفى بديع التمام صلوا عليه وسلموا أشفع لنا يوم الزحام يا تصويب بالرضا يا عين قلبي يا علا هذا جمال المصطفى أنوارنا حتما صلوا على خير الأنام المصطفى بديع التمام صلوا عليه وسلموا أشفع لنا يوم الزحام المصطفى بديع التمام صلوا عليه وسلموا أشفع لنا يوم الزحام يا تصويب بالرضا يا عين قلبي يا علا هذا جمال المصطفى أنوارنا حتما صلوا على خير الأنام المصطفى بديع التمام صلوا عليه وسلموا أشفع لنا يوم الزحام المصطفى بديع التمام صلوا عليه وسلموا أشفع لنا يوم الزحام يا تصويب بالرضا هذا جمال المصطفى أنوارنا حتما صلوا على خير الأنام المصطفى بديع التمام صلوا عليه وسلموا أشفع لنا يوم الزحام المصطفى بديع التمام صلوا عليه وسلموا أشفع لنا يوم الزحام يا تصديقي باللقاء هذا جمال المصطفى أنوارنا حتما صلوا على خير الأنام المصطفى بديع التمام صلوا عليه وسلموا أشفع لنا يوم الزحام المصطفى بديع التمام صلوا عليه وسلموا أشفع لنا يوم الزحام يا تصديقي باللقاء يا عين قلبي يا هذا جمال المصطفى أنوارنا حتما صلوا على خير الأنام المصطفى بديع التمام صلوا عليه وسلموا أشفع لنا يوم الزحام المصطفى بديع التمام صلوا عليه وسلموا أشفع لنا يوم الزحام يا تصديقي باللقاء يا عين قلبي يا هذا جمال المصطفى أنوارنا حتما صلوا على خير الأنام المصطفى بديع التمام صلوا عليه وسلموا أشفع لنا يوم الزحام المصطفى بديع التمام صلوا عليه وسلموا اشفع لنا يوم الزحام يا تسقي باللقاء يا عين قلبي يا عيونا هذا جمال المصطفى أنوارنا حتما صلوا على خير الأنام المصطفى بديع التمام صلوا عليه وسلموا أشفع لنا يوم الزحام المصطفى بديع التمام صلوا عليه وسلموا اشفع لنا يوم الزحام يا تسقي باللقاء يا عين قلبي يا عيونا هذا جمال المصطفى أنوارنا حتما صلوا على خير الأنام المصطفى بديع التمام صلوا عليه وسلموا أشفع لنا يوم الزحام المصطفى بديع التمام صلوا عليه وسلموا اشفع لنا يوم الزحام يا تسقي باللقاء يا عين قلبي يا عيونا هذا جمال المصطفى أنوارنا حتما صلوا على خير الأنام المصطفى بديع التمام صلوا عليه وسلموا أشفع لنا يوم الزحام المصطفى بديع التمام صلوا عليه وسلموا اشفع لنا يوم الزحام يا تسقي باللقاء يا عين قلبي يا عيونا هذا جمال المصطفى أنوارنا حتما صلوا على خير الأنام المصطفى بديع التمام صلوا عليه وسلموا أشفع لنا يوم الزحام صلوا عليه وسلموا اشفع لنا يوم الزحام يا تصديق باللقاء يا علم قلبي يا هدى هذا جمال المصطفى أنوارنا حتما صلوا على خير الأنام المصطفى بديع التمام صلوا عليه وسلموا أشفع لنا يوم الزحام المصطفى بديع التمام صلوا عليه وسلموا اشفع لنا يوم الزحام يا تصديق باللقاء يا علم قلبي يا هدى هذا جمال المصطفى أنوارنا حتما صلوا على خير الأنام المصطفى بديع التمام صلوا عليه وسلموا أشفع لنا يوم الزحام المصطفى بديع التمام صلوا عليه وسلموا اشفع لنا يوم الزحام يا تصديق باللقاء يا علم قلبي يا هدى جمال المصطفى أنوارنا حتما صلوا على خير الأنام المصطفى بديع التمام صلوا عليه وسلموا اشفع لنا يوم يا تصديق الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله
السلام عليكم يا شيخ. كيف حالك؟ How are you?
Alhamdulillah, I'm ready.
الحمد لله. Okay, 1 minute إن شاء الله.
Can you do Facebook?
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين رضي الله تعالى عنهم وعن كافة المؤمنين. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. Good evening, dear believers. Inshallah, may Allah accept all of our fasts. As alhamdulillah, we've now gone 7 days in Ramadan. And over the weekend, inshallah, by Sunday, we will have completed the first 10 days, inshallah ta'ala. Nas'al Allah al-qabool. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept from us. Ameen. We are now journeying together and going through part 8 of the Quran. Part number 8, Juz al-Thamin. Juz number 8 of the Quran. And Juz 8 takes us through the rest of Surah Al-An'am, the chapter dealing with the cattle, and then Surah Al-A'raf, the chapter dealing with the heights and the elevated spaces. And we'll talk about each of those, inshallah ta'ala. The first thing is to keep in mind the last part of Surah Al-An'am. And as I mentioned before, Surah Al-An'am, or the chapter that's dealing with the cattle and the herd, is really dealing with, particularly in this juz here, starting from verse 111 to the end, it's really dealing with the idolaters, the polytheists, the mushrikun who were in Mecca. The Arab mushrikun that the Prophet ﷺ was dealing with. And we are introduced here to a lot of the superstitious belief systems of the mushrikun, right? The Quraysh polytheist in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, that had to do with their perspective about animals, which is very strange, very difficult to fathom that human beings would actually stoop to that level in terms of the deviancy of their belief system about God and about God's creations. And so, for example, we have, starting from verse 111, 12, 13, all the way through verse 130, and really starting around verse 135, all the way to 150 or so, 55, we get these ideas that are presented by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala about what the Prophet ﷺ encountered regarding the belief systems that were dominant in his homeland, and particularly what they believed about animals and cattle. So, for example, Allah mentions that they believe that some of them were off limits for eating, and others were off limits in terms of being work animals, that they couldn't be work animals, and some were off, and some where some of the cattle were not available to be consumed, by women, and others, basically, what was in the stomach of some of the cattle could be consumed by some and not others. All of these strange, deviant beliefs the Prophet ﷺ encountered, and that led to discussions about what kind of meat was lawful, what kind of meat was unlawful, was halal and what was not halal. A big major theme that occurs in this juz, in the context of all of this, is the fact that there are certain kinds of meat that are prohibited for us, and particularly, what's most important is not only the meat of pigs, for example, and not only dead meat, what's called mayita, but more importantly, meat whose name of has the name of a different deity, or the meat in which the name of a different deity was invoked other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? So if somebody slaughters or kills meat and they invoke a different name over that meat, or they kill an animal, they sacrifice an animal, and there's a different name of a deity over that meat, for example, that meat is prohibited for us to consume. And so this is the larger piece that the part of this Juz 8 of the Quran introduces to us. The importance of, consumption, but more importantly that, the false idolatrous beliefs of people in the past that have no grounding, these idolatrous beliefs that had no basis with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and with Allah's legislation and with Allah's revelation, with previous scriptures, those superstitious beliefs are not supposed to be part and parcel of our practice as Muslims. And so this means that all other forms of superstitious beliefs and human practice that are not grounded in revelation are called into question. From this, we understand that, when there are declarations about what's right and what's wrong, particularly declarations that may be strongly ingrained in a cultural milieu or in the minds of people and based in the habits of people, that those things have to always be benchmarked with the actions of the previous generation of prophets and messengers, what the Prophet himself sallallahu alaihi wasallam did, what the early community did, for example, and it needs to be evaluated whether or not that practice is in line and in sync with the practice of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the righteous companions and the generations after that, for example. And so this is the first thing that the Juz points out to us. The second thing that the Juz points out to us is something very, very important that begins around ayah 131 and goes that begins around ayah 151 in Surah Al-An'am and goes to 152 and 153. There are three ayahs, three verses, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reminds all of us of the what has come down to us in our generation, in our time, what is known as the 10 Commandments. But in reality, in the scope of divine revelation are 10 laws that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has revealed specifically in the time of Musa alayhi salam. However, those laws were not exclusive to the people of Musa and for the time of Musa alayhi salam. These are universal laws of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that were constantly reinforced in the times of every single prophet. It's very interesting that certain things we think that in the times of previous prophets, for example, that only the theological message was the same. So, for example, there's this misunderstanding that, for example, in the laws of, in the during the time of Prophet Saleh or Shu'aib or Harun or Dawood or Sulaiman and Isa alayhi salam and Yusuf, for example, Yaqub and Ibrahim, that they all had the same message of Tawheed, but that the laws differed to some degree. But however, there was consistency in certain laws, and that consistency is mentioned in those three verses, 151, 152, and 153, which have come down through the law of Musa alayhi salam and known as the 10 Commandments. And Allah outlines those 10 ahkams, those 10 rules for us in those few verses, right? So, for example, the declaration that Allah is one, for example, that's something that is universal, and because it's universal, it is included in the deen of Islam, right? Number two, respect and honoring one of one's parents. That's another of the ahkam that are mentioned there. And that was universal throughout all of the prophets, messengers and scriptures. Respect and ihsan towards one's parents is constantly a theme that's been invoked. That's not something exclusively that was a part of the 10 Commandments at the time of Musa alayhi salam. Is also part of the message of Jesus alayhi salam and a part of the message of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam as well, right? Another component that's mentioned is not to kill your children out of fear of poverty, right? So This idea that, because you're poor or you fear about what the future may or may not bring, that you have to jeopardize the lives of your children, that has been prohibited. Not to kill a soul, not to take a human life, for example, is also invoked. That's not something that's only revealed or that was first revealed during the time of Musa alayhi salam, and nor is it something that was first revealed during the time of the Prophet alayhi salam. That has been a universal rule since the beginning of the sending of messengers and prophets to people. That's also in these 3 verses. The balancing and the fairness of the scale, which introduces the idea of fair commerce and fair trade and just dealings in the marketplace, right? Because that has to do with the trust in the society and people's needs being taken care of. So the preservation of the rules of the marketplace, trust in the marketplace, and fairness in economic dealings with each other, right? And so that's a central universal rule. Yes, there was a big factor related to that that incident, particularly with the story of Prophet Shu'aib, that's invoked in this juz here. But that's been a universal rule that was applied by each and every prophet and messenger, not only the Prophet ﷺ, but universally, right, across the board. Other things are mentioned in terms of keeping your word and keeping your trust with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, things of that nature, right? So there are several of these commands that are issued, which end up being 10 in total, that are part and parcel, that were tied to the universal deen of Islam, the universal deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that was transmitted by each and every single prophet. And now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala introduces that in this juz in the Surah Al-An'am, starting in verse 151 and then 152 and then 153. He gives that to the community of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It's very important for us to understand that we have inherited these rules, this expectation to live by all of these rules, the expectation to preserve these rules and their legacy, and the expectation to teach them and pass them along, and to live our lives in accordance with these rules. So this is something brand new that this juz introduces, that's introduced in this surah, that we have to keep in mind and be very, very, very observant over. Furthermore, in this chapter of the Quran, in Surah An'am, in this juz 8, we get the understanding based upon the rules for what is halal and what's haram regarding meat consumption, regarding what animals we can't eat, the types of animals we can't eat, with regards to what happened with the animals. Was the name of some other deity invoked over it? Did the animal die by blunt instrument, for example? There are different rules and regulations about that. What is derived from that is the understanding that the things that are prohibited for us and the things that are permitted for us, those things in Scripture, in the wahy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in the revelation of Allah ta'ala, they are known because they're in the revelation of Allah ta'ala. They're not discernible by reason alone, by the mind alone, by aql alone. So in other words, the rules of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are introduced to us by Scripture, right? By wahy, by nas, by the Quran, and then also through the hadith, through the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And then the mind takes those rules and then extrapolates and produces analogies and examples and extends the law itself. So our job is to first digest what the deen is saying, to first digest what the Quran is saying, what the sunnah is saying, what the nas, what the scripture is saying. And then after we digest it, apply it to different situations, and to also very important, brothers and sisters, it's also very important to distinguish in practice, to distinguish what is culturally normative from what is proper and prescriptive in the deen, right? This is the point of Allah Ta'ala introducing the practice of the polytheists there with what they did with animals. Right, so their practice with cattle, which is the name of the chapter of the Quran. With that, this chapter of the Quran is given this title to highlight the problem that social practice, customs, norms, social conventions may at times present a significant obstacle and may differ from what is halal, or may differ from what's haram, actually. Because in this case, there were social conventions, there were norms that were practiced by the mushrikeen of Mecca, where certain things that were lawful, that were okay, were made unlawful by the social practice. They were made haram. And then there were other things that were prohibited that were made okay by the social practice. And so what Allah Ta'ala is doing in this chapter is telling us that we need to make a definitive line between culture and religion. And that is something that as an American Muslim community, oftentimes we absolutely miss, right? We absolutely miss this bar. That many times we just jump on the bandwagon of culture and we have no understanding and no realization and no distinction of what is deen. Right? There's not even the question that's asked, is this Islamic or not? Well, no, this is cultural practice. You know, from visiting graves to the practice in different mosques, to how donations are run, to leadership, to all kinds of things, to marriages, to divorces, to the design of and the architecture of buildings. There's so many things that are culturally done that we don't stop and think and ask, is this actually rooted in our deen, or is this rooted in a particular locality and the practice of a people, and they just did that because that's the way their forefathers did it, right? That's also a narrative in the Quran as well, that this is what we found our fathers doing. That's also what this juz says when it introduces the message of Noah, when it introduces the message of Salih and others, that this is what we saw, or Shu'aib, this is what we saw our fathers doing. This is the way we do things. Well, just because a community does things in a particular way does not make it the right thing to do. Past practice does not legitimize present circumstances, and it certainly doesn't dictate what's right and what's wrong. We have to go by the text. We have to go by the scripture, the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. Just because something is done in some geography or in some historical time does not make it the right thing to do. So this juz tells us we have to be very clear to discern cultural practice from scriptural norms, right? What is done versus what should be done. And in some cases, they will align greatly. In some cases, it will be just fine. And sometimes they will not align. And you have to say, hold on for a second. This is what the forefathers and the foremothers and the four aunts and the four uncles have done, but that's not the right thing to do. Or it may be the right thing to do in one place, but that is not the right thing to do in this place, for example. So there has to be a definitive judgment that is made, that the mind makes, and a distinction between past precedents and current conditions and norms. This is very, very important. This is part of their universal rules. They're rules of Allah Ta'ala that supersede and that are applied in all contexts, in all places, in all times. And that's what these 10 ahkam, what are called the 10 commandments, that are mentioned in Surah Al-An'am, that's what they're about. That's why Allah Ta'ala said, wasakum bihi, that Allah Ta'ala gives you this counsel as a bequeath, as a wasiyah, for these 10 things. In all times, in all places, in all conditions, you believe in the oneness of Allah. In all times, in all places, in all conditions, you respect your parents. In all times, in all places, in all conditions, you never kill your kids fearing of poverty. In all times, in all places, in all conditions, you hold fast to honorable trade and equitable dealings and weights and measures. In all times, in all places, in all conditions, you honor the traveler and the orphan and your covenant to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, etc., 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 right? So there are things where cultural or historical presence or even contemporary activity, if it violates those commandments that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has laid out in Surah Al-An'am, and by extension the entire Quran itself and the legacy of the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, if the practice on the ground and the people in the city, in the village, in the town, in the nation, in the world, if those things are in direct violation of what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is putting forth, we can't do those things, right? We cannot do those things. And so that's the message in Surah Al-An'am in the first part of the juz. The second part and the last part, the final takeaway, is something from the next chapter of the Quran, which is the last part of Juz 8. And that is in the chapter that is called A'raf, which is the heights of the large, the highest part of something. Now let's briefly, what does this mean, this chapter Al-A'raf? Well, the heights, to understand what this means, let's go back just a second. In Surah Al-Baqarah, very beginning of the Quran, Juz 1, the first part of the Quran, Allah talks about humanity. From the beginning, He says the human race basically is classified into three categories. الَّذِينَ يُؤْمِنُونَ بِالْغَيْبِ وَيُقِيمُونَ الصَّلَاةَ وَمِمَّا رَزَقْنَاهُمْ يُنْفِقُونَ. Those believers who believe in the unseen, and they pray, they spend, right? Those who believe in the current scripture and the past scripture. That's one group, the believers. Then the second group is الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا, those that disbelieve. Whether you warn them or whether you don't warn them, it's the same thing. So أَنذَرْتَهُمْ أَمْ لَمْ تُنذِرْهُمْ لَا يُؤْمِنُونَ. They're not going to believe. خَتَمَ اللَّهُ عَلَى قُلُوبِهِمْ. They're done. They've rejected. They're going to reject. They rejected yesterday. They're rejecting today. They're going to reject tomorrow. And if you gave them 50 more years, they'd reject. That's the second group. Very clear. And then Allah Ta'ala spends a bulk of that, the first part of Baqarah, talking about the hypocrites, munafiqun, the shady people. Now, we talked about that. Now, fast forward to Surah Al-A'raf. In Surah Al-A'raf, in this juz here, juz number 8, Allah Ta'ala introduces two kinds of people as well. First are those Ahlul Jannah. He calls them the people of heaven. Right? In Surah Al-Baqarah, they were Alladhina yu'minuna, believers. Well, here in this chapter, Al-A'raf, they are Ahlul Jannah, people of heaven, people of paradise. That's one group of people. Then there's a second group of people who are called Ahlul Nar, the people of hell, the people of the fire. And those are two groups of people. Allah Ta'ala says later on in the Quran, فَأَمَّا مَنْ ثَقُلَتْ مَوَازِينُهُ, right? For those people whose weights and whose scales are heavy with good deeds, فَهُوَ فِي عِيشَةٍ رَاضِيَةٍ. They'll have a happy and pleased life. وَأَمَّا مَنْ خَفَّتْ مَوَازِينُهُ, and those are the people of heaven, right? People of paradise. وَأَمَّا مَنْ خَفَّتْ مَوَازِينُهُ. But for those, there are other people whose scales are really light in good deeds. Didn't spend a lot of time doing good things, right? فَأُمُّهُ هَاوِيَةٌ. So their place is not a good place, right? وَمَا أَدْرَاكَ مَا هِيَ. And how could you really understand what it means to not be in a nice place in the akhirah? نَارٌ حَامِيَةٌ. Well, it's just understand it's the blazing fire, period. So that's the people of hell. People of heaven, their scales are filled with good deeds. And people of hell, well, their scales were significantly light on the good deed side. Now, what about the third case? There's a third case of people, just like there was a third case of people in Baqarah who were hypocrites. But in this case, the third condition is different from the hypocrites. There is a third group here. And the third group are people, according to the dominant opinion of the Mufassirun, the scholars of Tafsir, they are people whose scales are not overburdened, but they are equally weighed, 50-50. Their good deeds and bad deeds are equivalent. That neither one outweighs the other. They are in the realm of Allah Ta'ala, in the judgment of Allah Ta'ala. When Allah judges their deeds, puts their good deeds on one side, puts their bad deeds on another side, the scales don't tip either way. They stay put. Right? It's like 50 good deeds on one side, 50 on the other sides, and each of the good deeds weigh the same thing. Those people, Allah Ta'ala also says in this chapter, and also later on in Surah Al-Hadid, near the end of the Quran, Allah says that there's a wall, right? There's a barrier called a sur. There's a barrier. There's a wall separating heaven from hell. Right? We have like 8 or 9 different walls that are constructed in the world now that are barriers between different countries now, right? I think there are 8 or 9 different borders that actually have border walls between them. There is a border wall between heaven and hell. that separates the inhabitants from Jannah, from the inhabitants from the hell. And I guarantee you, there's no special passport to get from one side to the other. That's up to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But the people whose good deeds and bad deeds are equally distributed and weighed equally, those people will be sitting on top of the wall. And that top part of the wall, where they have access to see the inhabitants of heaven, and they have access to see the inhabitants of the hellfire, that top, the pinnacle of the wall, the top part of the wall, that is called a'raf, right? From the word urf, which means the top part of the wall, from the word urf. And so the plural is a'raf. And so there are different heights, different levels, the different upper parts. And the people will be there awaiting Allah Ta'ala's final decision about what to do with them. And they will be granted sight and communication with both sides. And they will see the people in heaven, they will say salam to them, and they will look at what's going on with them and their delight. And then they'll see the people of hell, and they'll say, Ya Rab, please don't put us over there. Right? Don't put us over there, Ya Rab. And the end of the narrative in the chapter, it tells us that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will put them into heaven. Yeah, He will put them into heaven, subhanAllah, out of Allah Ta'ala's divine mercy and rahmah. So this is, on the one hand, this is telling us and introducing us to a third set of folks in humanity in terms of the way Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would deal with them. And what we will see in the Quran is that there are three types of third sets, right? The first one in Baqarah, you always have the believers and the disbelievers. Those are always the two sets, the people of heaven and people of hell. But then there's people in the middle. The first kind of people in the middle in Baqarah are the hypocrites. And Allah says they are fi dark al-asfal min an-nar, that they're in the lowest part of the hellfire. Don't want to be there. The second part of then the Quran introduces another third set in Surah Al-A'raf. Those aren't the hypocrites. They're the people whose scales are equally weighted. And they're at the top of the wall that divides heaven and hell. And those people will have some time there. They will observe both sides. And there's different interpretations on why they observe both sides, heaven and hell. One is that Allah gives them sort of a front row seat to watch His judgment and for them to think about themselves. So they see that there's people, Allah judges people certain ways and allows them to enter Jannah, and judges other people according to their deeds and the bad things they do, and they see them going into hell. And so they start to reflect on their deeds and stuff. Others say it's an honor, actually. It's a sharaf. And so there's different interpretations. But the point is, eventually they go to Jannah, they go to heaven. They don't go to the hellfire. Later on, the Quran will introduce to us another set of a third option as well, in addition to the hypocrites and to the people of Araf. That's later on. We'll cover that later, inshallah. But this is the point of the chapter. The last point of the chapter, brothers and sisters, we'll wrap up in about 1 or 2 minutes. This last point is that this chapter of the Quran introduces to us something new. Again, the Araf is something new, and the Quran hadn't talked about it before in the previous parts. But the other new point is the stories, albeit brief and short, but just like if you're waiting for, if in the social and entertainment area, when they want a movie to come out, they introduce the trailer to the film, so you get a preview of what's to come. This chapter gives us a preview, gives us a trailer, a snapshot of the story of 4 different prophets whose story has not been told before. Their names were mentioned, but the story has not been told. So we got the story of Musa alayhi salam a little earlier. Adam alayhi salam comes up as well. We didn't have time to go deeper into that story, but we highlighted a little bit of it. The story of Ali Imran and Jesus alayhi salam, etc. The story of Ibrahim alayhi salam has come up. Now we get the story of 4 prophets, preview to their stories. The first one is Noah alayhi salam. The second one is Salih alayhi salam. The third one is Lut alayhi salam. And the fourth one is Shu'aib alayhi salam. We get a preview to their stories. Right? The narratives about what they were telling their people was the same thing. Interestingly enough, with the 2 were Arab prophets. Salih was Arab lineage. Arab heritage, and Lut was as well. Shu'aib, we're not confident about his heritage, most likely Mesopotamian or from Bani Israel for sure. And Nuh, we're unknown. But there are diverse sets of prophets. Their stories are mentioned as previews, and so we learn about their people, what happened. Shu'aib was dealing with economic injustice with his people. Lut alayhi salam was dealing with different and practices and sexuality. Salih was dealing with sacred rights and not transgressing the boundaries of Allah, dealing with his people in that regard. And Nuh alayhi salam, these people outright just didn't believe Nuh alayhi salam at all about Allah. So in this case, this is the new introduction to their stories, a preview to their stories. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to allow us to take the ibrah, the lessons from their stories. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to protect us from being delayed in entering paradise, and to enter paradise early and not be among the people of the Araf who are gifted paradise but have to wait for it. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to allow us to uphold the ahkam in Surah Al-An'am, and to be people who distinguish between culture and deen and hold fast to the rope of Allah. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Tune in tomorrow night as we journey through the Quran with Juz 9. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. Today, inshallah, is our third installment of the revival of the soul during this Ramadan. And as this seventh night of Ramadan, or seventh day rather, finishes, a question for all of us: how are we doing? Are we still going strong? Now is the time that a lot of people start to relax their efforts. They start to get a little bit tired, or their enthusiasm wears out. And this might be a natural occurrence, but you shouldn't let it take the best of you. You should fight it back, and you should win. Ramadan is a marathon. It is not a sprint. Like success in life, success in the akhirah as well is a marathon. It is something where you keep going and you keep doing it. You keep persisting. Even when you have the energy in the beginning, it's easy. Later on, that wears off a bit. Push yourself further, and you can do it, inshallah. Put yourself mentally in a place where you know that I am capable of doing this, and I will continue to do it. I'll continue to increase my worship. My fasting itself will have deep spirituality. It will not simply be abstaining from food and drink. It will be something where I truly connect with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I will lay before Him my deepest spiritual issues, my deepest problems, my deepest things that keep me up at night, or that keep me anxious, or that I can't talk to other human beings about. This month, I will lay them bare before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, honestly. By yourself, at night, pray. Pray your own taraweeh at home, or even pray a little bit, whatever you can. Inshallah, you try to finish the Quran and try to understand it as best you can. Today, and the last few days, we've been hearing some news that the lockdowns that are in various parts of the world, we're starting to see the very first signs of, slight normalcy. So in the sense that these tough lockdowns, they're slightly relaxing here and there and a little bit all over the place. Just slightly. And it's going to take time before they go back to normal. So I wanted to take this opportunity for us to ask ourselves, what do we do in a time of a test? And what do we do when the test has gone, when it has passed? SubhanAllah, this is a theme that is repeated in the Quran. Many, many times it is repeated in the Quran, that man behaves a certain way when he is being tested, but he behaves a different way when that test has been removed. فإذا مس الإنسان ضر دعانا ثم إذا خولناه نعمة منا قال إنما أوتيته على علم بل هي فتنة ولكن أكثرهم لا يعلمون. And when adversity touches man, he calls upon us. He calls upon God. Oh God, help me with this. Help me with that. I've fallen into this problem. I can't do it. Right? I'm too weak. I'm not strong enough. And then when we bestow upon him favor from us, so the problem has gone, the adversity has passed, he says, I have only been given this. I have been only given this because of my knowledge. I have earned this. The fact that I'm now in a good situation, it's because of me, because of what I know, because of my own abilities. The verse continues. Rather, it is a trial, but most of them do not know. This whole thing is a test, is a trial. The fact that he was afflicted with adversity, and the fact that it was removed from him after he asked Allah for that. This whole thing is a test. How will you be? Will you be someone who only knows Allah in times of hardship, but when in times of ease he forgets, or makes himself forget, tries to avoid it? I want to enjoy myself, I want to have fun, even if it's in a way that isn't appropriate or takes you away from the straight path. قد قالها الذين من قبلهم فما أغنى عنهم ما كانوا يكسبون. Those before them had already said it, but they were not availed by what they used to earn. And what this means is that this kind of attitude of asking Allah when you need it, and then when the problem is gone, you turn away, has been present through mankind's history. People have done it before. People before them have done it. People before them have done it. And even those people, what they have earned has not gotten them anything. They haven't really earned, they haven't gotten anywhere with what they've earned. Meaning that their actions didn't get them to anywhere good. They didn't get anything good out of it in the end, even in the dunya or the akhirah. Because their heart was in the wrong place. They only asked Allah when they saw the punishment immediately in front of them. And subhanAllah, how many chances have you and I been given? We do something, we ask Allah help us, and He does. And then we still have the same path. Then we have a problem, Ya Allah help us. We will fix this. But we still turn back. And it is a human weakness. SubhanAllah, you see it in children. Sometimes you learn from children a lot more about yourself, about your own nafs, the human psyche. You see a child, you tell a child, clean your room or do this, a young child. And I'm not going to do it, I'm not going to do it, I'm not going to do it. When do they do it? When you start to take away something. Okay, I'm going to take this toy away because you're not cleaning it up. Then they say, okay, I'll do everything. And they start doing this and that. And you stop. You let them have it. You leave them for a while. They stop doing their duty. And this is, it's a human nafs. This is what the human psyche falls into if it doesn't take care of itself. For a child, you're supposed to educate the child. You're supposed to guide the child, teach the child, so that they grow up and they understand what responsibility means. And for your own sake, you teach yourself, you guide yourself the way you would a child, to come close to Allah and to understand the right path, that you do good because it is good. You do not do it because you have an affliction. And you do not do it just because you have a certain problem right now. Rather, if you are in an affliction, you seek Allah. And when it is gone, you still seek Allah. And in the affliction, if you know your own weakness, make dua, Ya Rab, give me thabat, give me constancy and persistence, so you do not turn away from your path after this has passed. And the Prophet ﷺ, he gave an example of 3 men who were afflicted, and they behaved differently when the affliction was gone. He talked about 3 men in Bani Israel: a man who was a leper, who had leprosy; a man who was aqra', meaning a certain kind of baldness, not asla, as in male pattern baldness, regular that many men have, but aqra'. And from the context, we understand that he had some disease in his head that was disfiguring, essentially. And a blind man. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tested them. And an angel came to them and he asked the leper, what do you wish? He said, I wish that my skin was healthy, so that وَيُذْهِبْ عَنِّي الَّذِي قَذِرَنِي النَّاسِ, so that this thing that people look down upon me or find me unclean because of, so that this goes away. So by the grace of Allah, this went away from him. And then he asked me, what did you want? Okay, I want this kind of wealth. He had camels. He went to the man who has the affliction in his head. He said, what do you want? He said, no, I wish to have to look healthy, and have healthy hair, so people do not look down upon me. So it went away from him. And what do you want? His wealth, the wealth that he had was cows. He went to the blind man. He said, what do you want? He said, that I can see. And it's interesting, you can already see that this man is different. He didn't say that so people stopped looking down upon me. He said, فَأُبْصِرْ بِهِ النَّاسِ أَنْ يَرُدَّ اللَّهَ إِلَيَّ بَصَرِي فَأُبْصِرْ بِهِ النَّاسِ, so that I may see people. SubhanAllah, it was about using the blessings of Allah and using it in a positive way, rather than, the perception of people of him. So he got his sight back, and the wealth that he wanted was sheep. And and over the years they all got rich and they got everything. So this same angel came back to them a long time afterwards, and he went to the first man. He said, "Give me, I'm a poor old man. Give me some money and give me some help." So the man said, I have a lot of responsibilities and I have a lot of financial burdens. Go and find someone else. So he said, weren't you a man who was a leper, and you had this and that, and people wouldn't even want to look at you, and Allah blessed you and he cured you and you became rich and you had this and you had that? And he said, the man in his arrogance, he said, I inherited this money from a noble lineage. And he said, so the angel replied to him, if you were a liar, may Allah bring you back to what you were. And he went to the second man, and he did the same thing. But he went to the man who was blind, and he said to him, I'm a poor man, not from this area. I have nothing to do, nowhere to go. Just give me something so that I may get back home. He said, yes, take whatever you want. This is my money, this is what I have. Go take whatever you need, take whatever you want, because خذ ما شئت ودع ما شئت فوالله لا أجهدك اليوم شيئا أخذته لله. I will not prevent you from taking anything you have taken from Allah. This is a man who has remembered the favor of Allah upon him. He understood that all that he has is the favor of Allah. And you don't have to have been healed miraculously in this way. SubhanAllah, any time you get healed from an illness, it is a miracle. When you look at it, Imam al-Ghazali, he used to say, إِنَّ كُلَّ مُعْجِزَةٍ طَبِيعِيَّةٍ, and everything natural is really a miracle. What we call natural is, subhanAllah, just look at how your body behaves. Look at how this current virus is going. The only real cure is people's built-in immune system. How does this thing work? SubhanAllah, it's phenomenal. It's this amazing thing that is a miracle. But the only difference is it happens all the time. So we're used to it, and we don't appreciate it the way we should. But it is a miracle. When you look at it, subhanAllah, you are humble. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has blessed. And what each and every single one of us has been given, he should be thankful for. And he should turn back to Allah and remember, this is not you. This is a blessing. You've done this, you've done that. It's not you. It is from Allah. Be thankful to Allah. Keep that in mind. What you have done is a tiny thing compared to what you have been given. And subhanAllah, the Quranic paradigm is very interesting. Some people sometimes who come from outside of Islam and they read the Quran, they say, well, it's not organized by topic, right? It's not like, well, this is what this surah is about this topic, and this is about this topic, and but that's kind of the point, right? When humans write a book, when we write a book, the point is usually to convey information. If you want to convey information, you organize it in a book. You make it into hierarchy. You make chapters. This is about that. This is about that, and you encapsulate it. You make these little, pieces. Whereas the Quran isn't just trying to convey information. It's trying to change how people think. It's trying to persuade. It's trying to open your eyes to something new. And subhanAllah, the way it does that is a certain one topic, say a story of a certain prophet, is interspersed throughout the Quran. You see it here, there. Then you see it here from a different angle. Then you see it here again. Then you see it there. So that if you were to see all of it at once, you would get a little bit bored, and also you wouldn't get the same effect. People sometimes need the same thing over and over in different doses, right? That's why when you go to a doctor, they don't give you everything at once. It's over time, right? And the same thing is with your ideas. When you look at it from here, you look at it from here, and slowly you come to understand, okay, now I understand what this is really meaning. It's not just this surface information. It's trying to change something in my heart. And one of these stories, or one of these themes that recurs in the Quran multiple times, is the theme of the people who are in the ocean. It's fine at first, it's great. And then they are afflicted with a storm. And SubhanAllah, the example of being a storm in the middle of the ocean in a storm It's frightening. It's like the entire world around you is shaking. It's hostile. Everything is against you, and you're on this little piece of wood trying to live. And in this situation, when they are just completely at the mercy of whatever comes their way, they feel tiny in these massive waves. They ask Allah for help. And then when He does give it to them and they pass through, they just go back to business as usual and they do not turn to Allah, rather they turn away from Him. So let me mention two of these verses. هو الذي يسيركم في البر والبحر حتى إذا كنتم في الفلك وجرينا بهم بريح طيبة وفرحوا بها جاءتها ريح عاصف وجاءهم الموج من كل مكان وظنوا أنهم أحيط بهم دعوا الله مخلصين له الدين لئن أنجيتنا من هذه لنكونن من الشاكرين فلما أنجاهم إذا هم يبغون في الأرض بغير الحق يا أيها الناس إنما بغيكم على أنفسكم متاع الحياة الدنيا ثم إلينا مرجعكم فننبئكم بما كنتم تعملون. It is He who enables you to travel on the land and sea. And when you are in ships and they sail with them in a good wind and they rejoice, there comes a storm and waves come upon them from everywhere and they assume they are surrounded. They supplicate to Allah, sincere to Him in religion. If you should save us from this, we shall surely be among those who are thankful. But when He saves them, at once they commit injustice upon the earth without right. O mankind, your injustice is only against yourselves, being merely the enjoyment of worldly life. Then to us you shall return, and we will inform you of what you used to do. SubhanAllah, in this ayah, the story of the people who turn to God when they're in the middle of a massive affliction. Everywhere they look, wherever they look, whatever direction they look, they see death. They see that they will drown. And yet they are saved. They turn away from Allah as soon as it's gone. So what does He say in return? He gives them the highest. This is the first such verse that occurs in the Quran, in Surah Al-An'am. Or Surah Yunus rather. This is in Surah Yunus, which is yet to come. So when this verse talks about this, what does it talk about? It talks about if you do this, if you make this choice, at the end of the day, your transgressions are against yourself. You're hurting yourself. You're just going to live in the world for a bit. This was a good reminder for you. This was a way for you to turn back, but you wasted. You're just going to live in the world for a bit, and then you will come back, and you will be held to account. In another ayah, in Surah Al-An'am, which we were just reading, or are reading tonight, inshallah, in this ayah, there's a slightly different perspective. قُلْ مَنْ يُنْجِيكُم مِّن ظُلُمَاتِ الْبَرِّ وَالْبَحْرِ تَدْعُونَهُ تَضَرُّعًا وَخُفْيَةً لئن أنجانا من هذه لنكونن من الشاكرين قل الله ينجيكم منها ومن كل كرب ثم أنتم تشركون قل هو القادر على أن يبعث عليكم عذابا من فوقكم أو من تحت أرجلكم أو يلبسكم شيعا ويذيق بعضكم بأس بعض انظر كيف نصرف الآيات لعلهم يفقهون. Say, who will save you from the darkness of the land and the sea when you are calling upon Him, imploring aloud and privately? If you should save us from this, if He should save us from this crisis, we shall surely be among those who are thankful. Say it is Allah who saves you from it and from every distress, and yet you still associate others with Him. And then look what He says. The ayah says, He is the one able to send upon you affliction from beneath your feet, or to confuse you so you become different groups and make you taste each other's violence. Look how we diversify the signs that they may understand. What this means is, you turned away from God. Well, okay, you turned away after you were saved from this massive storm. You turn back, you're on land now. So you feel safe. Okay, I'm not in the storm anymore. It's done. It tells you. So the first time He told them you're wasting your life anyways, if you're taking the wrong path. The second time He's telling them, even if you're judging by the worldly punishments, or if something wrong with you, you will still be punished. You can still be punished. He gives them examples. Even the ground beneath your feet, or punishment can come from you, from beneath you, or from above you, or between you. There can become conflict, and you can destroy each other. SubhanAllah, how often do we see this? You see like massive empires throughout human history. They devolve and they turn against each other. You see, nobody can be strong enough to take them on. But people, they split, they divide, and they hurt each other. SubhanAllah. And these examples are not there for us to think about theoretically. They're there for us to think about in our own lives. A lot of people, they turn to God in times of difficulty, and then when they're back on their feet and things are fine, they say, well, I was weak at that point. I wasn't myself. That's why I turned. No, you were awake from your stupor at that point. The illusion that you have is now. The illusion that in your own power was gone when you felt weak, and you saw the reality that you are a weak creation. You are a small human being. You've been blessed and given a lot of opportunities and used them the right way, but you are the small creature of the earth. It is good that you turn to God at that time. Turn to God in times of difficulty. Alhamdulillah. Just keep turning to Him after. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us among those who are humble and grateful and return to Him at all times, in times of difficulty and in times of ease. And inshallah, many of us during this time of difficulty made promises to Allah and promises to themselves. Now that the difficulty is slowly going away, how many of us will keep those promises? Make dua tonight that you are among those who keep the promise in the best way possible, inshallah ta'ala. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم وجزاكم الله. والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله.